Alright, in this penultimate episode, we will be prepping the piston rings onto the pistons and then installing the pistons into the block and finishing up the bottom end. So I hope you enjoy this one because it's been really fun for us. Let's go! Alright, now here we are installing the OEM tie-hoe rod bearings. Unpacking it now from its packaging just to inspect it before we go on. Oh, there, the compressor went off. Sorry about that. One thing to note of, make sure the bearing saddles are clean and the back side of the rod bearings are also clean because any debris or dirt will affect your oil bearing clearances. Something worth mentioning, props to Spoon Sports because that's where we got the idea for this piston and rod stand or contraption. So if you're a Spoon Sports fanatic, you should have seen when Tatsuro Ichishima shows about their engines or projects, you should have seen this in one of the desks. If you haven't, then you're just a superficial Spoon Sports fan, which is totally fine. Last one. Okay. All rod bearings are ready now. Now on to the NPR piston rings. If you remember, in episode 3, we set the ring gaps and talked about piston ring clocking, and this is how we packaged them. Remember? You can click up here for a reference or a refresher on that. We will also have a link in the description below of episode 3. This way you can keep going back to it for reference points. Now we're on to install the rings. Make sure the ring saddles and the piston rings itself are all clean. This way, when you put oil in them to lubricate, they're gonna function as properly as they should. Now see, we actually try to lavishly lubricate the rings and hang them upside down. This way, when it's time to clocking them, it's well lubricated. Therefore, when you use the ring compressor, it's all good. Okay, now the ever useful WD-40. We're spraying the bores so that we can wipe it clean with a shop towel or a paper towel. You can never be too clean on wiping the bores, especially when you're about to install the pistons, because dust particles just get stuck in the bore as it sits in the engine stand. So you gotta make sure as we continue to wipe it now. And some of you may wonder, we do this on every single build that we do. It doesn't matter if it's a stock rebuild or a race engine rebuild. So if you choose us for rebuilding your engine or you have us rebuild your engine, you can be sure it's gonna get the same attention to detail as we always do on every engine. Now almost done with the paper towel. Looks like we gotta use one more page or one more sheet of paper towel just to be sure on everything on the bore. One last wipe and then we shall continue. Oh, the piston rings will love their new home. It's clean and ready. Now don't forget to lube the rod journals before installing the pistons. We use the Torco assembly lube. And you can click up here because we have a video that's all about assembly lube. Okay, we turn the crank just to get the other side of the rod journals of number 2 and number 3. Alright, now let's go back to the bench with the pistons. Alright, now here we are. Let's put a piece of paper just to not be messy. Okay, the ring compressor. Funny thing with this ring compressor, I've been using the same one since 2006 and it hasn't failed me. So I guess they say, don't fix what ain't broke. And the funny thing is, the best tools or the coolest tools will not make an inferior builder into a great one. Tools don't pay off intelligence. So you better watch out for those cool dudes with cool tools. So we're lavishly oiling the rings now. This way, when we installed it, it's such a breeze. Okay, we're gonna make sure it's clocked how we want it. Alright. Okay. Now we use the ring compressor. Make sure whenever you're tightening the ring compressor, it doesn't sway or swedge the piston rings. Because as you tighten it, it may keep turning the piston ring off clock. See, you gotta double check, you know. Alright. We tighten it little by little. And you just have to compress all the piston rings, you know. Try to leave as much skirt as you can. This way, it helps guide the pistons into the bore when you're installing it. Alright, now after the block. Okay, we are on piston number 1. Okay, you gotta be careful not to hit the rod end on the bore and scratching it. We lightly tap the perimeter of the ring compressor just to make sure it sits flush on the deck. There. And as you tap it, you can see that you can actually tighten it one more click. It's gonna be a little bit tight or hard, but you can literally see it gets one click. There. Wait, a little bit more. There. It's a light tap. Alright. And you can see it goes in easily. That's it. Okay, now we turn the block for the rod cap. Get off the lock. Turn it. Oops. And there you go. The thing with the D series is that you gotta put the rod bolts at one side and the other, simply because of the main cap. You gotta get ready. There. Alright, now off to get the rod cap. Okay, now onto the rod cap number 1. It looks like it's a little bit difficult, but it's not really. You just have to make a quarter turn on the crank just to get it snug or get all the bolts lined up. Then it just falls into place like that. We put the rod bolts in. We do this by hand. Of course, there's no other way. But just be careful not to drop the rod bolt. Although you just have to turn the engine vertical so just to, to grab it when it falls, but just not to add work. So hand tight it to keep it snug. Now onto the other rod bolt. As you can see, we turned it a quarter or a quarter turn just to get room for the next bolt. Alright. Double check if it's hand tight. Alright. It's good. Now off to the torque wrench. Okay, we torqued it to do 23 feet-pounds as specified by OEM Honda. Make sure the rod bolts and the rod nuts are clean. You can click up here for specifications when it comes to rod bolt stretch gauge. Although OEM rods, except for Type R, you do not need to stretch it. But on this video, we specify why it's important to be clean, especially on the threads. Now on to piston number 2. We gotta speed it up because it's just the sequence of what we showed earlier. Just get everything aligned and it's just easy to install the pistons and the rod cap. And now piston number 3. Don't forget to keep lubing the piston rings. This way, it's just an easy install, right? Okay, number 4 piston, and the last one. And now it's gonna be good. Just turn it into final torque. You can literally hear the rings scraping the bore. It sounds so good. This concludes the bottom end. All that's needed is bolt on the oil pickup and slap on the oil pan. That's it. Next and final episode, we slap the water pump, head gasket, and the head completing the engine. And we got a surprise for you guys on that. Links will be in the description for all the things that we discussed for further information and analysis for you guys. Feel free to DM us on our page for any questions.